Warm good morning to all present here and welcome to the second day of the FTP. The first session today will be handled by Dr. Gabriel Simon Patel, Professor, Department of Commerce, Kerala University, Trivandrum, on the topic Solo Structure of Learning Outcome. I welcome Dr. Gabriel Simon Patel to the session. Sir, the platform is yours.
Okay, thank you. I think I can share the screen.
Yes, sir. Yes.
So we'll start.
Yes, sir.
Hope it is visible.
Yes, sir. The screen is visible. Yes.
Okay, so good morning and welcome to the next session or the next day of your faculty development program. And we are looking at something which is an extension of what we discussed in the previous day, because yesterday afternoon we discussed about outcome-based education. Today we are looking at yet another model of outcome-based education, which is more interesting and which is more practice-oriented, which is more application-based, and which I think will address some of your concerns as to how this can be made possible in an environment which is complex, which is large, which is huge, and all that. I believe today, because it's a morning session, you would be more fresh and you would be more energetic and more live with your session, because yesterday I saw maybe a couple of you who have logged in, but you were not there with the session. So today being a morning session, and all of you, or all of us rather, being fresh, we'll be able to look at this in a better way. So welcome, and let us start looking at this. SOLO. SOLO stands for Structure of Observed Learning Outcomes. So first, this will be the overview. I'll be talking about the relevance of quality in education, which we discussed yesterday. So this is together. OBE relevance and futures also we discussed yesterday, and that OBE relevance and futures, the holistic approach, is applicable here as well, because this is also a technique of outcome-based education. Bloom's taxonomy we discussed in the last in the last session, and now we look at more of SOLO with illustrations of those models, because this is more on observation, and we'll have a discussion at the end. So this is what I have for you in the morning. Now, Bloom's taxonomy yesterday we saw was starting with remembering, understanding, application or applying, analyzing, evaluating, and creating. Now, this is under an OBE model. Now, an extension of this is what we are trying to look at when we are talking about SOLO. It is the structure of observed learning outcomes. Now, again, synonymous with what we saw yesterday, here also there are learning outcomes. But the basic difference is in Bloom's taxonomy, we are talking about having outcomes in place. Then you deliver your content and your assessment, and you look at outcomes have been achieved or not. Now, this method talks about observing the change that is happening in the learner and making the learner learn through observations also. So it's observed learning outcomes, and that means what outcome you had predicted and what outcome was observed in the learner is considered, and accordingly you create an extension. So apart from that, many of the things are by and large similar, but it talks about observing the learning outcomes, how the learning outcomes are sinking into the learner, and perhaps relooking at it, and you're creating a design or a lesson plan where you are continuously observing what is happening in terms of the outcomes, and then revisiting your outcomes and redefining and repositioning your outcomes. Now, what this concept is actually talking about, it talks about learning to be a journey. Learning simple to complex, a journey from the participants, you mute yourself because
distinguished participants, you are all requested to mute your mic. Otherwise, it will be a disturbance for the whole session. Requesting all the participants to mute your mic. Dear participants, we request you to mute your mic.
the problem here is we have some participants who are not we are giving an instruction, they are not the instruction because they are not.
Professor Soumya Natarajan, kind attention please. You are requested to mute your mic.
ஒண்ணுமே வரலையா இந்த இன்னைக்கு இந்த வாரத்துக்கு
If somebody can make a call to those. Okay, so
I'm giving a call, sir. I'm just giving a call to him.
I'm giving.
Okay, we continue. The problem with your online training and online teaching that we have, one of the issues is this. You have your people who are logged in and they are neither here nor there. So my request is it's not necessary that you are always here. But once you decide to be here, then you need to be here and you need to put your mind into that. Otherwise, even what we do in turn in our institution gets affected in the same form. Okay, so this is, I hope I'm audible. This is a journey which is from simple to complex, a journey from unstructured to structured, a journey from unrelated to relational, and a journey from intent outcomes to observed outcomes. So this understanding has to be very firm at the beginning. Now, what we mean by learning a journey from simple to complex. When I start with a concept, or when I start deliberating, even now when I'm starting solo with you, it is something which is generally not much known as far as the learner is concerned. It is a concept which is new. It is a concept on which we have a very simple understanding, and then from there you move on, and you say that okay, the advanced form, it is something which is complex in understanding, or it has got some complexities in its extension or its application. So simple to complex talks about starting off something with its simplicity. That means suppose suppose I want to teach a program in a computer application, maybe some program. It might have its own complexities, but my starting point would be on anchoring on the concept of certain basic facts, certain basic illustrations, basic examples at the beginning, where it is very simple. So I might say that using this program is as simple as using a pressure cooker for cooking or riding a bicycle. So I'm saying that it is as simple as that. Then I add one concept to it. Then I add one more concept to it. Then I relate the two. Then I'm looking at applications and go higher and higher. You look at any instrument in engineering or any procedure in medicine or any creation, work of art, there is something in it which is very light, very simple. From there, you go on adding, and then you say that, okay, it has got a wider extension. So simple to complex is what Solo looks at. Again, unstructured to structure. Any concept initially will remain very unstructured. Suppose I want to talk about the philosophy of Perth, or I want to talk about the philosophy of performance appraisal. Initially, it might sound to be like I'm appraising the performance of another. It's very unstructured. It is not much known, and it is not much in terms of relationship. So I just leave it over there. Like it's an unstructured concept for me. But slowly, when I learn deep into it, I make it structured. I make it patterned. I make it bring factors together. And then when it becomes more structured, it goes deep into your knowledge. So unstructured at the beginning, simple at the beginning, and we are moving. Again, initially it might be unrelated. I'm talking about the concept. Initially, it might not relate with other concepts. It might not relate with other factors. It might not relate with other components. But as you go advanced, you tend to bring in a relational kind of approach into it. And initially, you have some intended outcomes. And from there, you move to what is actually observed. And you go into that philosophy. So this is a journey of structure of observed learning outcome, what we call Solo. It was developed by John Biggs and Kevin Collins in 1982. So it is more recent, and it is a philosophy which came after your Bloom's taxonomy, which was in 56. And this also looks into action verbs. All those things are similar. So now we'll try and see how this works or how this actually has to go into. Structure of observed learning. It is a means of classifying learning outcomes in terms of complexity. Certain things are simple, certain things are uni-structured, they are multi-structured, they are related, they are associated. So it goes on and on in terms of complexity. Students will be assessed in terms of the quality of the outcome, not just having an outcome. The quality of the outcome is also looked into. And they look at the tasks which are capable of being achieved over there. So this is the philosophy. Now look at this. Unlike what we saw in Bloom's taxonomy, we had certain things which they were saying as remember, understand, apply, analyze, evaluate, create. They were also moving from simple to complex. But here the movement is in this form, something that you are going to teach or some content that you're going to address in the curriculum. Initially, it is very pre-structural form. It has got no structure as far as the learner is concerned. It's not that it does not have a structure. When I start it off, for me, it does not mean much. There is no structural relationship in it. Then as I proceed with addressing it in terms of the outcomes, I try and develop one structure into it. I give one concept, one factor to it. And slowly up the line, I give multiple structures to it. Then you relate it to different factors. And finally, you have an extended abstract when you're going to apply, create, or synthesize it into real life context. That is the complexity of it. But ultimately, when we are starting from here, we intend that it is a journey which moves up to extended abstract. Suppose you're talking about measures of central tendency, as simple as that. You say there is something like mean, median, mode, or you talk about a probability theory of addition or multiplication. Initially, it might sound like, why should we reduce data into measure of central tendency? Then I understand, okay, mass data, difficult to comprehend. So you need to have one value which condenses. So just one factor I now understand. It becomes unistructural for me. So I understand that there is a need. Then I relate it to getting one figure and then interpreting it. So multi-structures are developed. Then I develop a relationship between reducing data and bringing it to figures where I can further use it for some kind of an interpretation or some kind of analysis. Then I'm using this finally to test hypotheses and to have judgments. So extended abstract. This is what the taxonomy actually talks about. In any discipline, on any school of thought, on any content that you have, you can see this actually moving in this form. Your first class, the first time you address students on something with a new concept, be it a computer program, be it something in chemistry, be it something in economics or history or literature, for them that will be very pre-structured initially. The task of the teacher is to look progressively how they move from this, and from this pre-structured, how they are giving one structural element to it. Then how they go on adding structural elements to it, into the same theory. And finally, how they relate it. And if possible, how they go into the extended abstract. This is the psychomotor part, which was talked in the Bloom's taxonomy, which we saw yesterday. There we were saying, you remember, you understand, that is all the cognitive domain. Then the affective domain, where you're talking about the heart, it talks about how you receive, how you respond, those things come over there. And after having all the information, knowledge, analysis, and evaluation, that is in the cognitive domain, you have to move to the affective domain, where you receive, respond, and then you ultimately move into your hands, doing something with it, working with it, acting with it, living with it, giving meaning to it, giving life to it. So this is the final objective of education. And they were saying at that point of time, which we discussed yesterday, that by and large, what was happening is very little movement into the psychomotor. And there we saw that in outcome-based education, where people were physically asked to do certain things, then their outcomes were very sharp. So if I'm learning something, I'm going to do it, I'm going to live with it. If I'm learning engineering, I'm going to live with that electrical engineering or civil engineering. I'm going to do that. I'm going to practice that. So then there comes your psychomotor domain. Same thing here, in place of psycho, here you have your extended abstract. You're extending the unistructured, multi-structural, relational thing that you have developed into a real life. This is what is talked about. And it need not be in a very hardcore application of invention. It can happen there also, but it can even be in how you look at concepts in terms of a real life situation. Now, this is like, suppose in a commerce course, you teach something banking. You cover lots and lots of concepts in terms of check, in terms of chronos, in terms of crossing check, in terms of IFS, in terms of MICR, all kinds of things which are often transacted without any intention of moving into the extended life. That means they're never shown a check, they're never shown a bank, they're never shown an application, and they understand that these are all things which we must reproduce and put into the examination and attempt. When we talk about the same measures of central tendency, we have to say that this is again reduced into variance. This is again used for different concepts of population and sample parameters and test of hypothesis. And that is where you do analysis in terms of the data that you encounter in life, extended abstract. So this movement is what actually the taxonomy talks about. And how this movement can be made possible is different from discipline to discipline, domain to domain. But the general understanding of this will help us to understand that our task is to look at a concept which initially remains very pre-structural, try to understand the first concepts which catch in order to make it structural, and then how you actually bring in more and more multiple factors into it, relate and bring in a coherent relationship which finally gets extended. So this is actually what we are dealing in the taxonomy. Now look at this, the same part, we are putting it on an axis of competency. Initially, your learner is in a pre-structural state, competency level perhaps is 0. Now what happens? Unistructural, they learn one factor in that, just one factor. This is the most important. And then they believe that, okay, this is the concept. So I've taken a few examples. Suppose I'm talking about stress. I'm going to deal with the concept of stress. So when it is pre-structured, I don't understand. I just understand that often here and there you hear that there is a problem with stress, and stress has got something to do with psychology and things. But it is not very clear to me. Pre-structure. Now I then understand at this level, unistructural, that stress is a feeling of lackness that I have in me. So I lack something. I lack something. I do not have something. So that the laxity is one factor that comes here. Then further, when you study the theory, I understand that it is performance as well as certain things that I lack. It has got something to do with another concept called threshold. It has got something to do perhaps with the accommodation that I have to the factors around me. So initially it was just a feeling of something lacking. Now I have moved into levels where I'm saying it is not just that, but it is also 3 or other factors like associated with performance, drawing from the environment, looking at threshold, 3 or 4 things. But even now it is not related. You look at those lines, they are all standalone kind of things there. I have not related between performance, feeling of lackness, or the threshold. I move further to relational. What am I doing? I am relating the stress to performance. I am relating it to my threshold. I am relating it to the level of accommodation that I can have. I'm relating these concepts together. Now they are all related together when I'm going on further with the concept of stress. Then at an extended abstract, what is happening? I am taking this out to look at something outside. I'm taking this off to look at something which is happening outside. Somebody who specializes in human resource management, I'm just giving an example. You start in continuation of what we discussed yesterday. You start with motivation, and initially perhaps what the learner understands in this stage here is that, okay, motivation is the movement from one state to another, very pre-structured. Then I'm saying motivation has got something to do with the desired behavior. One unistructural, one structure I'm giving it, desired behavior. Then I'm saying it's not a desire, it's unfulfilled need, movement to desired behavior, and dealing with frustration. So 3, 4 factors. But I don't understand how they are connected. Unfulfilled need, frustration, desired behavior. How to connect, I do not know. Then you teach the theories and say Maslow or Herzberg, how they looked at unfulfilled need, getting associated with frustration, looking at how you get into the desired behavior and how motivation is possible. Now it is related. You're bringing a rational relationship between these factors. But then how much do you again move into this stage? After having studied this relationship, are you competent to motivate somebody in the industry? Extended. Are you competent to motivate somebody at home? Are you competent to motivate your subordinate, your peer, or your superior? Extended. But this extended, does it happen? Or that is what we have to look into. You again study, suppose something, I'm giving another example in finance. You talk about dividend theory. So initially, it is not at all known much. What do you mean by this? Then you say, okay, there is a factor which says that dividend has got something to do with the value of a share, one unistructural. Then I'm saying dividend and value of the share as well as value of the firm is related, 2, 3 factors. Then I'm trying to relate all these things, how they are connected. Dividend, value of the firm, its relevance, its irrelevance based on a set of factors like market perfection and tax and all that. Now I'm coming to the extension. How do I use this dividend theory in order to decide how much of my profits I must give to the shareholders? Extended. So this is the movement that we are talking about. Initially, your when you have this extended level, look at the competency, you are here at the peak. If you have just related, you are here. If you are not able to relate, you are isolated with different elements, you are here. And if you have one concept, you are here. Then it is pre-structured. Your competency level is the least. Now, the benefit that we draw when we talk about great institutions is that they look into this approach. It's a slow but sure approach. You're saying that this factor is associated with this. There are 3 or 4 or 5 factors which relate to this. These are how these factors are connected in the theory, and this is how the theory gets extended into a real life context. That extension into a real life context could be through a product, through a service, through a societal change, through a character display, through a work of art, through the creation of a new play or a drama, can be in different forms. I'm extending it into a real world situation. That is what we are talking about when we are saying structure simplified. So this is solo. Now on this count, if you start looking at your respective disciplines, it is very well worked out in different. You see, it's very relevant in management, more in application, even in social science or humanities. It has got an application because only thing is there you look at things which are societal. Here you are looking at things which are concrete. So you are trying to see how this movement happens, and what actually happens here is in fact wisdom. So this is what Solo actually tries to teach us. Now, we were in the previous one talking about a level. Usually this is level 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now, what happens in each of these levels is what we are trying to see next. Now, what happens in level 1 when you are in the pre-structured stage, pre-structural stage? Concept is very vague and task is not very understood. I don't know how to motivate. Suppose I'm talking about the old concepts which we discussed. I don't know how to motivate, or I don't know how to look at what part of the profit should be given as dividend, or I don't know exactly how performance appraisal, 360-degree appraisal can take place. I'm talking about some concepts. So the concept is very vague: 360-degree appraisal, or critical path method, or the programming technique that initially it's very vague. The task is not understood. The learner hasn't really understood the point and used this too simple a way of going about it. So okay, it's just like, okay, you do certain things and you look at how I can go about it. But it is not very clearly understood. My competence is very low because I only know the term. I'm not fully sure about the concept. I have not very well internalized the concept. This is level 1 when you are unstructured or pre-structural state. Now, level 2, unistructural. You are adding one element to it. You are adding one factor to it. You are giving one substance, a small substance to that concept. When I said motivation, I understand, okay, it is related to movement from one state to another state. That I understood. So one factor, unistructural, the learner's response to one relevant aspect. This motivation that we are talking about is basically a movement to a desired behavior. But I do not know what are the other factors associated and how they are related. This, in fact, is level 2. Now, level 3, multi-structural. Now, the learner's response here focuses on several relevant aspects. But these relevant aspects are treated as independent of one another and additively. That is what we were discussing in that this thing. See these factors in level 3. They have got 4. It can be 4, it can be 3, it can be 5, but there is no relationship. They are all standalone, independent of one another. So at this stage, what happens? I'm giving the same example. In the level 1, I just understood that it is a motivation. I'm talking about motivation theories. We are discussing motivation for the first time, saying that it is. I didn't understand anything. I just understand that, okay, this is something which has to be done in an organization for strengthening or for getting better performance or good behavior. Then I understand that this has got something to do with a desired behavior, movement to a desired behavior. One factor I am adding over there. Then I am understanding that this has got something to do with an unfulfilled need, the resultant frustration, addressing the frustration and getting into a desired behavior. So 4 aspects I have brought into it. But I don't understand how unfulfilled need will lead to frustration, or how frustration has got something to do with a behavioral input, or how managing frustration will go into a desired behavior. So I'm not able to relate. I know these concepts independently. This is level 3. And level 4 is relation. Now I'm relating between all these. I'm relating an unfulfilled need, the consequence of an unfulfilled need. It might create aggression, it might cause flight or whatever. And I'm saying that is what causes frustration. And from frustration, so they are connected. They get connected now. And from there, you move into giving certain reinforcement, and then you will go into a desired behavior. So that is what we saw here in this case. Now these 4 factors that are talking about are bound together, related together. So that is level 4. And finally, you move into level 5. That is the most important thing. And that is where the competency peaks. That is where practical wisdom comes. That is the point at which you are empowering. You are seeing the true transformation. You are seeing the true change. What is that? The previous integrated whole, the relationship that you have developed, it is conceptualized at a higher level of abstraction. It is generalized to a new topic or to a new area. You are generalizing this for a new area. That means I understand that this philosophy can create desired behavior if I use it in this relational form. If I use it in this multi-structural form, it can be put into application in a context. But it will be something which is highly contextual, which will require skills in the blending skills that you need. It cannot be directly like you pluck a theory and apply. I have to go into its adaptation. I have to go into the stages that it requires, and I have to build it up. So that is actually that is what happens when we are talking about the theory of in the level 5. So actually,
அதோட என் பையன் இருக்கான். ஒரு நாள் சொல்லிவிட்டேன், நாளைக்கு வந்துருந்தா வண்டி எப்போ சைக்கிள் ஓட்டி பழகி இருக்கேன். ஒரு நாள் பழகி விட்டு 2 வருஷமா ட்ரை பண்ணி வீலுள்ள சேர்ப்பிக்கிட்டு 2-3 மாசம் ட்ரை பண்ணேன். அப்புறம் வேற ஒரு சைக்கிள் எடுத்தேன்.
Okay, so this is the movement that we are talking about. So it has to be a stage-by-stage approach. So if you are not going into this particular format, perhaps we'll start bringing all the structural thing at the initial stage. There is little understanding in that, or you will directly dwell into application where you have some problems in that. So this movement, simple to complex, unstructured, unistructural, multi-structural, relational, and finally extended abstract. That is what we are talking about in solo. So it's a slow movement, but it is a sure movement because we are doing it purposively. I am trying to impart some competency by talking about a concept in which initially nothing is known, then one factor is known, then several aspects of it are known, then a relationship between the factors is created, and then it is extended into a real life one. There you give life to it. There you give life to your theory. The final stage, stage 5, you give life to your theory, you give meaning to your theory, you give application to your theory. It is like that. I have lots of ideas. Initially, one idea strikes me. Suppose I am a literary person. I'm going to write something. An idea strikes me. Then I relate this with certain societal factors. Now I have 4, 6, 7 ideas. Then I relate them together. Then finally, I decide to relate this whole into a story. And your extended level comes when you write that and give it out. Similarly, work of art. I have an idea about a scenery, or I have an idea about a concept which needs to be picturized. So I initially have one factor about it, then I relate several factors to it. I give it the multi-structure, I give it a relational value, then I take my canvas and put it out over it. I have an idea about a product. I initially test it with one factor, then I understand that there are several factors related to it. Then I try to put the factors together, then I develop a theory on that. And finally, I'm trying to see whether this theory of mine or this factor of mine does find application in a given context. So that is the levels that actually you need to go through. Now look at this. This is which I've taken from the work of John Biggs and Kevin, their site information. Just for you, I've given the source over there from which I've taken, so you can also look at this. The same 5 structural factors. You look at the competency level where it stands. Incompetency, incompetence. It is, you are missing everything over there. It is in a very, your state is something where you're talking about things which are actually very pre-structured. Now you have caught hold of one factor relating to that. You identify maybe a name, or you follow a simple procedure. You talk about something which is related to that. And interestingly, this is where I'm going to shed some light for you. The way you look at the YouTube lectures, the e-content that is developed, they just talk about something which is unknown to one factor that will make it interesting. One factor that is catchy. One factor that can appeal. But still it is at that stage also, here also, it is something which is unistructural. From there, I'm saying this has got, you combine, you describe, you enumerate, you perform serial skills, and you list them. Multiple skills. You talk about different things. So now you are bringing several relevant factors together, but they still stand independent. They are not related. From there, you move one step, you relate between them. Now, what happens? It is here in your cognitive level, your otherwise in the other levels, it is just remembering or just understanding that there is one factor or two factors. But here, because these factors are connected, what happens? You are capable of analyzing, applying, you're capable of comparing, you're capable of contrasting, you're capable of criticizing, because I understand these factors. So when you talk about that relationship, you will find one theorist saying that yes, it is related, another saying no, it is not related, or the relationship is not that strong. Even in theories of medical science, food habits and longevity of life, number of factors you bring initially, then you say, okay, these factors are independent factors. Then you say longevity of life and the food calorie and food intake and food timing are related in this factor. Some might argue yes, some might say no, some might say some are yes, some are no. So that happens only when there is this relationship exists. So at this level, what happens? You analyze, you apply, you compare, you contrast, and you see this happening in many of the theories in management. So also it will be in literature, humanities, social science, and all. When you talk about in economics, demand price theory, elasticity. When you talk about capital structure theories in finance, there is relevance, and MM who said irrelevance. They said they were arguing against it. That happens only when you're trying to create relationship between the factors. Here, when they are independent, that does not happen. But there are factors which have to be pulled from one to several, and then you have to relate over it. And so after analyzing, applying, arguing, comparing, and all that, finally you move to the final level. This is the create in the Bloom's taxonomy. This is the psychomotor domain in the Bloom's taxonomy, where what are you doing? You're formulating, you're actually generating, you're hypothesizing, you're reflecting, you're theoretizing something, and that is that theoretical finding of yours is based on your context. I might say that this applies. I'm not saying that universally it is wrong, but I'm saying in my context, in our state, in this industry, in this part, this relationship is how it works. So now I'm talking about a context in which I'm going to put this or give life to it or give meaning to it. A theory evolves. The hypothesis is proved or disproved. So this is the extended part of it. And when you reach here at this stage, this stage, your competency is the highest. That is why we are saying, in order to bring this experiencing, in order to bring this ability to apply, analyze, contradict in a context, we use cases, we use illustrations, we use live demonstrations, because we are trying to create an extension over here. This is the structure. This I have taken from from John Biggs, the source is given over here. I have taken it from that particular point over there. Now, what happens? There is a constructive alignment which takes place. Begin with intended outcomes, just like you do in Bloom's taxonomy, what you want, and align teaching and assessment to those outcomes. Yes, you have some intended outcomes which you decided at the beginning. Students should be able to understand or analyze or what is that you want them to do. Then the outcome statements are learning activities which are expressed as a verb, which we saw same in Bloom's taxonomy. Students need to perform what they need to perform to best achieve the outcome. What they should do. If you want a student to analyze, what should they do? If you want a student to evaluate, what should they do? If you want a student to extend this, what should they do? This extension part, this hypothesizing part, this theoretization part comes more through cases, more through observation. But if you just want them to analyze, you can give them situations and ask them to analyze. So what the students should do in order to achieve or perform, that has to be clearly, specifically given. Now, suppose we are talking about this, I've given some, apply Herzberg's two-factor theory of motivation. So they are going to apply that. But definitely to apply that, they need to know what are the factors, the unistructural, the multi-structural, and the relational part. Only then they can apply. Judge liquidity of a firm from a financial statement. So here I'm talking about judgment. If they have to do that, it is judgment part which will come perhaps in a relational stage. Unless they are able to look at the unistructural, what are the factors which go into liquidity? Maybe current assets are important, liquid assets are important, the current liabilities are important. So I understand the factors, and then I'm trying to see how these can be related to judge. Now that verb says what the relevant learning activities are that the student need to undertake in order to attain that intended learning outcome. So it is not just saying the outcome, it says what could be the activity, the act which they must do in order to attain or in order to achieve that outcome. Learning is about what they do, not about what the teachers do. So what should they do? Should they just read? Should they do some experiments? Should they do some lab work? Should they do some field work? Should they do some experiencing? That's what I was referring to in the case of banking in your BCom course. There are several things where experiences can be brought to the class. Your instruments, your writing, in the capital market, an IPO. You just take an IPO, initial public offer, and bring that to the classroom and demonstrate that. There are several things which gets experienced. Underwriters, price band, ASBA, several concepts. So it talks about what you want them to do and not what the teachers to do. Likewise, assessment is about how well they achieve the intended outcome. How effectively are they actually achieving the intended outcome? That becomes very important. The outcome just placed there. Yesterday we were discussing that. How do you know whether that outcome has been achieved? And if so, to what extent they have achieved that outcome? That is, we are trying to observe that. And that is what is the uniqueness of what we call as solo. Now I'm talking about some illustrations. I've taken few examples. You can have any examples for this matter. In fact, a workshop of this kind becomes effective only when you yourself look into the different situations or different conditions under which you can understand this. I have taken a concept of stress psychology, and you can also look into Gandhian ahimsa, product customization in marketing, performance appraisal in human resource management, debt to the value of a firm. Any concept you can try. In fact, what people like you should do when you're talking about the academic perspective of it is, in fact, trying to see how this relationship can happen. That's all. There is no meaning in directly talking about solo at length unless you look into your perspective. That's why in the earlier training program that we had, we were giving this, just like for OB in Bloom's taxonomy, we give the tagging part, what we saw yesterday. And look at your curriculum and see how PSOs can be developed, COs can be developed, and the tagging can be done. That's an exercise there. Similarly, in the discipline in which you are, in the domain in which you are, try and see how some concepts are related to the competencies or outcomes. In terms of it being initially unstructured, then unistructural, then multi-structural, then it goes into relational, and finally it goes into an extended level. So I'm giving some examples. That is what, in fact, remains in this presentation. I'm not going, because this is what actually we need when we are talking about the practice in a particular context. So this is stress. I'm taking the example of stress over there. Level 1, what I understand by stress is that it's a feeling of emptiness. That's all. I'm not quite sure. It's very vague. Is it emptiness, or is it the lack of something? Something that I do not have, or something on which I'm feeling empty. So it's very unstructured. I'm not quite sure what it is. It is vague. It is not clear. I don't know whether I can call this stress as emptiness, or whether I should call it as a lack of something. These are things which are not known to me. But that is level 1. Level 2, now what I'm trying to do is, I am trying to look at how stress impacts performance. So then the question comes, in that case, if it is positively influencing, then it could be good. If it is negatively influencing my performance, then it could be bad. Now, one factor has come now. How is stress related to performance? So I don't know whether it's emptiness or vagueness, but I know that it has got something to do with performance. And if it is positive, it could be good. If it is negative, it could be bad. So now, level 2, I have a unistructural model. I have infused one factor into this. Even now, the concept of stress in its totality, in its wholeness, is not clear. But I have related this to a factor that is whether it could be good or bad. So unistructural. Then level 3, I understand that, okay, it is good up to a certain level. Now I'm introducing a concept of threshold. So performance, one structure. Now level 3, I'm relating performance to the level of threshold. Those who learn stress will understand that. Then I understand that after threshold, this is stable. That means it does not influence performance. Then it reaches burnout. So I'm talking about a third structure, third factor in the structure, multi-structural. I'm saying performance, threshold, burnout. At the point at which your performance starts declining, performance starts falling. So now I made it multi-structural. So look how I moved from this. Initially, I understood it as just emptiness or lacking. Then I understood that this as something which could have positive or negative influence to performance, one unistructural. Then I understood this as performance up to threshold, stability, and then burnout where it falls, multi-structural, level 3. Now, even now, these are not related. How is performance moving up to threshold? What happens after threshold at the level of stability? What happens at burnout, and how all these factors get related is not come. That is what happens in level 4. And look at this. This is level 4. Now, what happens in level 4? I have related in one axis what I've given as P is performance, and this is the level of stress, the horizontal axis, and here you have the performance. So initially with stress, performance goes up. This happens up to T1 level of threshold. Then further, your threshold can perhaps be enhanced slightly. You are more accommodative to the levels of stress because you are exposed to that, and you reach T2. My objective is not to talk to you about, I'm just telling how that relationship comes. So then you reach this level. Then there is something called stability. And then further, if you are stressed, your performance is coming down. Your performance is coming down. This is what we call burnout. Now I have related stress with performance, with threshold, with enhancing threshold T2, with burnout, and then with a pause. Holistic combination. Now, when I reach this stage, the learner as well as the teacher, in fact, the teachers are also learners at that point, they start evaluating, they start criticizing, they start arguing. In the first stage, when it is in the initial stage, when I understand it as emptiness, when we are talking about level 1, there is no argument. There is no criticism. There is no constructive, because I'm not quite sure whether it is emptiness or lacking. And subsequently, when I'm saying performance, I'm not sure whether it is good or bad or whether it is truly linked to performance. Again, at level 3, I know that there is something called threshold, there is something called burnout, but I don't know how it is related. Multi-structural stage. And finally, when I'm reaching a stage of relational, when I relate all this, now comes the question of analyzing, evaluating, comparing, contradicting, relating, arguing. All these things will come up at this stage. And these things happen only when your learning context is having a free flow system where this understanding is, this relational part is there. If this relation part is not understood there, there will be no argument. There will be no analysis. Perhaps there will be some reproduction. I'll say that there is something like threshold, there is something like burnout. It is all independent. I know that there is something like threshold. I know that there is something like burnout, but I don't know how it is related to performance and how, what stage, what happens, and how and why it happens. The why of it is not very clear. So the fourth stage, where you're talking about relational, you bring a relationship between all these factors, and you're saying this is how it happens. So there you analyze, there you evaluate, there you argue, there you contradict and all. And then you move to stage 5, the last stage. Now we are talking about how the stress actually happens in an industry. There again, you will see that it is not exactly like how it is said here. It is not exactly like how it was theoretized. Maybe in one industry it goes in one way, in another industry it goes in another way, in one organization, one individual. There will be the fundamentals, the relational elements will be true, but the context in which it moves has got some difference. This is where you're talking about extended abstract.
வீடியோவையும் ஆடியோவையும் இது பண்ணுங்க. சேஃப் ட்ரைனிங் போர்ட்லயும் போச்சு.
And when you're actually capable of doing this, that is what we call the extended or the higher stage. That is your psychomotor outcome domain in which you are. There is a higher level of competency that you actually manifest. This is what Solo talks about. So it might sound to be complex, but at least understand competency up to the relational stage is not at all a difficult thing. Extended abstract perhaps requires some kind of application, some kind of contextualization, some kind of looking into industry, some kind of looking into society, some kind of looking into individuals, sometimes looking into families. But the first 4-stage movement is something which is very joyful, very meaningful, and very easily done. Now I'm giving another example again. Here I'm talking about product customization. Earlier we were talking about, I'm not trying to present the theory on this. As I said, stress, I might not be an expert in stress. I'm just talking about those factors and trying to relate that. And you have to look at your discipline and how it works. Now this is a concept in marketing. What happens? Level 1, I'm saying that we are going to look into a concept of product customization. And then it is said that, okay, a product can be customized according to the way a customer needs it. So it's not very clearly understood that the product is available in the market at one particular rate. I buy it, and how can I use it the way I like it, and B use it the way B likes it, and C use it the way C likes it? Not very clearly understood. So customers can use as per their need is what is said. That is what is initially said. So it sounds to be very vague. It sounds to be very confusing. And I don't understand how need, modification of the product, using the product according to need can happen. I'm not able to relate between this. I'm not able to understand the structure with which it operates. I'm not able to do any of those things. So it is free structure. And then it can't be said that an outcome on learning customization has happened at that stage. The level 2, I understand that, okay, yes, product can be adjusted to need. So need-based use is one factor, unistructural factor, one factor that comes to my mind, using according to need. But there, other than need, what are the other things which come over there? I move to level 3. Now I understand product, customer needs, the changing conditions. These are all factors. But then the changing conditions, the needs, and the product, how do these all get related? These are all independent. Additively, I can understand that based on the need, the product should be modified. Based on the conditions, the person should be able to use the product. But I don't understand how this is possible, how this can be related. Now I move to level 4. I look at type of customers, the needs and their preferences. Based on that, changing dimensions and use as per needs is possible. So I'm relating between need and preferences, the changing dimensions in which they use, and use as per need. I'm relating all the 4 things together. And the next level, I look for product designs in the market. How this can happen in the market. If you look at how the example of tea bags have come, it is exactly like this. It's a classic example for customization. That means initially everybody thought that tea was tea. It is made and everybody should take it the way you like it. How can you make it strong tea or light tea or with tea or without tea or black tea or white tea according to the needs of the customer? Then you add the concept of tea bag and the caution coming with milk and sugar separate. So based on, somebody wants it strong, they can dip it more several times. Somebody wants to have it with sugar, they can add the sugar or decide not to add sugar. Somebody wants it black, they can decide not to add the milk in it. It is a case of customization. So this, I relate all these things and I find out, okay, tea bag is a product where it can work. There could be products in which it can work very effectively, and there could be products in which it cannot work very effectively. There could be products in which they could have some minor tilting into the customization, and some products into which major tilting can happen. The tea bag is a case where you can have a major tilting. A major shift can take place. So when I'm talking about this concept, what I'm trying to say is customers can use as per their need is what I initially understand, which sounds to be vague. Then I'm trying to see, okay, adjusting to need to some extent is possible, unistructural. Then I'm trying to see other factors, needs, changing conditions. Then I'm trying to relate between needs, changing conditions, preferences, and then the modification that can come based on those factors. Just a minute. Hello? Hello? 11 o'clock again. Okay, so sorry. So looking for product designs in the market, then I'm trying to extend this. If you're designing a car, can you do the same philosophy? Will it work with a car? Will it work with an air conditioner? Will it work with a two-wheeler, or will it work with a refrigerator? Whether according to the need of the customer, you can modify it. And when you do this, you will see at level 4, you have created relationship, and when that relationship comes, students will say yes, it will work or it will not work. They will analyze, they will evaluate, they will criticize, they will argue, and they'll say, okay, yes, it works. Then that is only a theoretized thought. Then you come to the 5th level, then you say, okay, yes, it works. Where? Which industry? Which product? With which customer? That is extended. You move to a level of extended realities over there. So I've given 2 examples. Even when I'm talking about a concept, say the Gandhian philosophy of ahimsa, I'm teaching Gandhian studies. Now, when I'm saying ahimsa, like, okay, based on what little I know about it, it is like I should not be violent. It's very pre-structured. It is Is it ahimsa in your thoughts, or is it ahimsa in your acts, or is it ahimsa in the spiritual context or a social context? Nothing is known to me, but I understand that ahimsa basically stands for non. So it's free structure. Then I am saying, okay, ahimsa is fundamentally not hurting others. So hurting, unistructural. Then I am saying it's not just physically hurting, it is also your mental thought. So physical hurting and mental thought on violence are two structures. Again, I might develop other structures as the value of looking at the well-being of others. So not hurting physically, not hurting mentally, value of looking three factors, four factors. Then, but I don't know, I am not able to relate between these. Then finally, you are saying you are relating between them. Your mental thought on being at peace with others, then your physical acts, then the spiritual context, then your value system. You bring in a blending between these. And then you argue, then you analyze, then you evaluate, and then finally you extend my philosophy of ahimsa in whatever context you are. You have your hypothesis, you have your theory. This is the highest level of competency that you have. So what we are trying to say is that this philosophy or this practice, it can happen in whatever be the domain, the discipline you are. You can see wonderfully working in different structures where you're creating products and services, when you're designing products, when you're talking about management philosophies, when you work with financial products and services, banking products and services, they're everywhere. In fact, even in when I'm creating a play or a poetry, you see this demonstration actually happening over there. Now, I'm just trying to bring a modified version of this where I'm talking about a movement from data, information to knowledge and finally to wisdom. Now, how much I can decide to start from data, move into information, go into knowledge, and go into wisdom, which is in fact extended or what we call the application of that knowledge, the use of that knowledge. That is the whole problem that we were discussing yesterday in outcome, that you gave this much of knowledge. Is that knowledge something which must rest in the lab, or does it move from lab to the field? If I have lots of research in agriculture, ultimately, do you have good agriculture products which are free from insecticides and which will give a better living for the farmer? If you have substantial amount of research in medicine, it should reduce ailment and it should give healthy living. So also, if you have talked about a lot of principles in management, policies in management, this must get something whether those who have learned that are able to see that this is practiced or used in a particular context. So how much of that linkage happens and where it happens is ultimately wisdom. Otherwise, it is like I'm informed, but I'm not able to convert this into knowledge or convert this into wisdom. So the system or the values that you're trying to support it with might not always exist. Now, when we are talking about observed learning outcome, that's why I was talking about your e-content or developing content. You are looking at the way it is done. How much are we? So I can talk about a philosophy of say management by exception. I can say that this principle was developed, or management by objective of management by exception was developed by so and so in this year. This is what the theory says. So I'm not relating this at the basic level, at the basic level with any kind of data. I'm not giving any examples. I'm not talking about figures. I'm not talking about observations. I'm not talking about facts. I'm straight away giving you some information that normal things which happen in an organization can be dealt at the lower level, and only things which require exceptional attention is given at the higher level. So that's all. So this I'm starting with pumping you with information. And when I'm just giving you pumping you with some information, it again stands as vague. It stands as, maybe I can take an examination and pass because I'll reproduce this in an examination. Opposite to this, the new, what do you call, not the new, the way this observed is saying that you start with some facts. You start with some examples, you start with some figures, you start with some observations. Suppose I'm talking about health, I'm saying, you see, this many people there's infant mortality out of every 1,000 births, this many people are dying. So I'm talking about a fact. I'm talking about some data. I'm talking about, suppose I want to talk about a theory on poverty or a theory on some construction. I talk about something which collapsed recently. Or I'm talking about history, I talk about how a ruler did something in a particular context. So I give facts, figures, and observations. So I'm starting from something which is very simple. I might not know the hardcore theories on infant mortality, but I just understand at this level that when there are 1,000 births, this many people die, and this is how it varies between states. Then I go to the information part, the next stage, where I'm giving in some information. I give some information, and I say this is the thing. This information gets processed into knowledge, and that knowledge goes to the high level of system. This is just the stages that we are talking about when we said pre-structured, uni-structured, multi-structured, relational, and your extended abstract. So it is like the ability to use your knowledge, to live with that knowledge, to transform it into action, to see that there is a change with what has happened. And that is something which is very relevant in any context in which you are, including now what you're doing. 2 days we are discussing outcome-based education. In your inaugural session, you had a keynote address. Then we talked about systems approach, and then you talked about outcome-based education, and then Bloom's taxonomy, and now Solo. Now, at least one among this, if it does not percolate down to you, if it does not enrich you, if it does not enable you to put it into action, then it all ends at the level of what we are saying, that it is either unistructural or multi-structural, or at times it is even relational, but I'm not able to extend it. But several things that were talked over in 90 minutes, at least one of this, if I can transmit, if I can use in the context in which I actually teach or learn, then I'm having an extract or an extended part of my theoretized knowledge. That is what we're talking about. I'll just give a simple example. Suppose we want to know about the health of students in the college. Obviously, we'll start with data. Imagine there are 1,000 students. You will take 1,000 height, 1,000 weight, 1,000 blood groups, 1,000 food habits. You have 1,000 figures or 1,000 figures each for each of the variables that you have taken. But that does not give you any meaning. You process that. You take the average height, average weight, average height and weight of female, average height and weight of male, then their food habit and weight relationship. And you say that, okay, 10% of the students are underweight and 20% of the students are overweight and 70% are normal. Now you have again information. Then you look at why this is happening, how this is related to the food habits in their age. And finally, that is knowledge for you. And finally, when you are saying that if students need to have good health, they need to have these diet habits and these lifestyles, and you are trying to incorporate that, you are extending that knowledge to the context. That is wisdom. This is what we are actually, this theory is trying to talk about. But at least at the level of knowledge, if you can produce something, thanks to information technology, you have data on your fingertips today, tons and tons of data. You have got lots of observations being made. You have got lots of digital data which has been captured at different points. But then, based on that, you could have information. But it is not just giving the information and theory that might create structures, unilateral, multilateral structures in the learner. But are they able to relate? They are able to create a relational structure between those factors on whatever theory or whatever concept you are teaching, and evaluate and analyze only when they understand how these relational factors in fact are holding good. So that is what we are trying to bring about when we discuss these factors. So it's very important, not just to, that's why we say when we are starting with simple to complex, what we are trying to say here is simple facts that I want to say. See, the suicide incidents in this. Suppose I want to talk about the philosophy of habits. I'm just illustrating through examples. I can talk about the suicide incidents, which data is readily available, different states, different countries. So some data I'm giving, some facts. Then I'm saying, why does this variation take place? So I could say that this is because of one factor. Then I'm saying, okay, this is because of multiple factors. Then how do these factors relate to the place where I'm referring to? Relational. It is at that relational stage that you have arguments, you have evaluations, you have criticism. And from there, you are saying ultimately, okay, these are the things which are required for happiness or for bringing in a drastic change in the suicidal tendencies or commitments which can happen. Now, this is again a relationship onto that. Data, which are facts, observations, and experiences. Some people can talk about their experience, some people can talk about what they saw. When we are trying to discuss models of waste management, there are beautiful pictures of waste compilation, waste scattered. There are also good demonstrative models of how waste is being scientifically procured and recycled or reprocessed. So data, facts, figures. From there, you go into information and knowledge. And then you make extension, use and application. That application, as I said, need not be misunderstood as seeing it as directly something which goes into tangible or physical or tacit objects. It can also be social dimensions. It can also be societal conditions, so on and so forth. So when this is done, this is where we talk about a blended model. A blended model, in fact, if you look at all kinds of innovation or invention or new thinking and creative thought or creative work that has happened, let it be in drama, poetry, play, art, culture, to inventing products, innovations that have happened in the industry, it always has something which we say is looking into what existed, looking into what we are trying to add now, and looking into the future. So it is in fact a blending between concepts and theories inside and observations outside. So that is where solo becomes important. Observations outside. That means you look at all great scientific theories or inventions. We have read about a man who sat under a tree. He saw an apple falling to the ground, and it led to an invention. You know who I'm referring to, and what is this? Now, this is not the first man who sat under a tree. I'm referring to the gravitational force, and this is not the first apple that fell to the ground. People like you and me, we all have sat under different trees, and many things have fallen. But we could not find out nothing. We could not find out anything new. Now, what was there in this man is what we call in research as hypothesis. And if you have seen the solo model, you see the extended, the last stage, what we have said, an extended phase talks about hypothesizing. And what do we actually mean by hypothesizing? It is a combination of two words, hypo and thesis. Hypo means below or less than, which is the opposite of hyper, and thesis means something which is scientifically established, empirically tested fact. So something which stands below this or less than this. How does it come? It comes when these phases that we talked about in solo do happen. That means when I find a unistructural element to something, then I move into multi-structural. I might have known about 3 elements or 3 aspects, but there could be 4 or 5. I relate, relational. Then I argue over it. I internalize it. And when I deeply internalize this, I have a sense of doubt. I have a sense of rational thinking that something which happens in my society, something which happens in the family, something which happens in the industry, something which happens in the organization is happening because of this or is not happening because of this. is happening because of this theory or is not happening because this theory is not good. This is hypothesis. So this can come only when two things happen. One is the multi-structural relational aspects of the theory are deep in me. It's not just sufficient that that works. Along with that, I need to be applying my mind into the context into which I'm looking at. As I said, I need to look at these students of my institution when I was talking about the health example. I need to look into these users in my state. I need to look into the customization that is required for the industry and the product in my mind. So observations also, and then you get that link. Similar to that, what is happening with the learner and how the learner actually can extend it is what is that is why we are saying your projects, live projects, your assignments. There's no meaning in asking students to reproduce and write 15, 20, 30 pages. At times asking them to constructively reduce something and bring in one para on what exactly is the crux of an argument will be having a deeper learning than writing 15 pages. So you're making them observe. You're making them experience. You're making them go deep into it. You're making them argue. That means relational. Even in a concept of MBO, I can say Peter Drucker said something, and I can say that there are objectives, organizational objectives, vision, mission, multiple structures, then department objectives. Then I can say how the departmental unit objectives get linked to the. Now I'm saying you take an organization, you come down and see how these objectives are related in their context. I'm relating, asking them to observe. Then they might come out and say, sir, in this organization, this is not very good or it does not happen in the way in which it is visualized. That is what we are actually talking about when we refer to this concept of extension. So this is the essence of it, observed outcome, how it can be actually practiced, how it can be actually given life and meaning. That is what is looked into. So cases that you develop on that count is very important. How many cases and for what those cases are developed, those things are very. And then you also understand that if you have to develop this, the unistructural, multi-structural, relational stages, if you have to pass through that, it comes through the existing knowledge and the context. And the existing knowledge is something which could be generic and universal, but the context might be something which varies what you want to be done in a particular situation. That is that there when you take this out to that case by the fact figures, and it is not a difficult thing what we said here in the data stage, the fact, observations, experience. It is relatively easy because of the technology that you have today for the learner and the teacher to capture the data that is currently available. That means only from an existing paradigm, something new, from the known, we move to the unknown. In fact, all learning is shedding light, and all light means that light becomes meaningful only when darkness is removed. And the removal of darkness is understanding where you are dark and where you are light, where you have light. The darkness is the first stage where things were very vague to me. Things were not at all clear to me. When I thought that this concept has only one unistructural aspect, in the case of stress, when I thought that stress is just emptiness. Again, when I thought it is not just emptiness, partially some light came. Then when I related it to not just emptiness, but also performance, threshold, burnout, some more light came. Then when I brought it into a relational structure, more light came. And when more light came, new thoughts came. Is it because of this? Is it not because of this? Then we started looking at how this actually happens in industries, in organizations, in situations. This is extended knowledge. Paulo is just talking about how we can make it meaningful in that context. Now, this coming to the final part of this, this is again related to a purposive method. Purposive in the sense that if your purpose is just examination, just like in many of our training programs, if the purpose is just certificate, I might log in and go out. I'm not bothered what is said and all. I'm just looking into a certificate. So if your purpose is just examination and your examination is just reproduction of your knowledge where memory is the only factor which is important, then in that case, what happens is I can stop at the level of unilateral and multilateral. That is more than enough. Because in the examination, I'll say MBO, suppose I'm talking about MBO, I'll say Peter Drucker said this theory. It was evolved in this date. This is the definition. There are two concepts into it. These are the factors. Done. And the more effectively reproduction is done, the more marks you get. So there's no analysis, there's no evaluation. So there is no relational part. And even when you're related from the relational, through cases, through live projects, through assignments which go into context, your outcomes are defined. So that is where last time, the last class and today that we saw. Your assignments, your assessment, your cases, your industrial visits, the entire process, including the last end semester examination, the lab work that you do. Now we are talking about apprenticeship, embedded learning. We are talking about summer internship. All this talks about exposing you into this relational elements of all that you study. Exploring the possibility of creating a relational dimension for the theories that you study and seeing whether you are creating somebody who's gone. That's why I said when you talk about surgery or when you talk about a pilot, it is very clear because they have to fly a plane tomorrow, or they have to do a surgery for a patient. So in those cases, they are very concerned that every small thing that they learn are things which tomorrow they are going to do. So they learn it in that format. Those are the places where OB became very practical, very oriented right at the initial phases. So that is, those are the points where actually you see the dimensions moving in a very appropriate form. Now, what we can all do, just like in your tagging for the Bloom's taxonomy, here, this is the basic structure. You can look at any discipline, any concept, any theory, any model, any design that you have. You can put it into this level and you can see initially it is here. Then you can identify it, just like I did for stress, just like I did for market customization, just as I did for Ahimsa. You can bring one factor, you can bring 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 factors, you can relate and you can see whether this is possible. Where it is possible, maybe it's possible in a very small way. But even if it is in a small way, at least even if you can do up to this stage, the relational stage, it's a big experience. It's a big advantage that you have. But if you are just standing in these two levels, that is where I know only the factors, 2 and 3, level 2, level 3. Then competencies obviously will be at this level. I know the factors, but I don't know where, when. Many things that we actually teach and learn are things which might not be practiced as given there. Some are practiced as such. Some are practiced with modification, and some are practiced in a very different form, and some are never practiced. But if you are putting it at these two levels, that is not important. Whether they are practiced or not practiced, relevant or irrelevant. Because I'm just learning that there are factors. I'm not trying to bring in a relational element into it. So it stands out over there. But if you are doing this relational, that itself is enhancing your competence. It is enhancing your capability. It is enhancing your ability to go further. And this part will make you, that is why you look at institutions like IIM that I was talking about, great business schools or great IITs. They talk about relating to real context. They have their own apprenticeship programs, their own projects. their own live consultancy, their own industrial experience. You can do that. And today, don't be under the impression that it is only great institutions great institutions alone that can do it. Any institution can do it, or even any individual can do it in your own context. You can work with your curriculum because, as I said earlier, the environment today, the systems that you have in institutions today are at two levels. One is you always use the backup of the organization in which you are. So I decide to teach what is assigned to me. I decide to go by a curriculum, what is given to me as prescribed by my university or my institution. I decide to teach the students who are assigned to me. But when you do that, along with that, you have a freedom to have independent goals. There, these things, if you find that it maybe organizational is one part, I'm saying even if that is not working, I can think of having one particular course for me in a program, maybe in engineering or in management or in arts, commerce, science, whatever. That course is a course that I'm offering. Maybe it is not prescribed by my university or my institution, but I'm offering it for somebody who might need it in some other place. And that course, I'm having the OBE model, maybe the taxonomy and the solo structure with me. It has got some focus 3 or 4 modules. And you find a lot of takers for that based on the success and the application that it is giving to certain sectors. You have the freedom to do that. That is what I said happens in SWAYAM and MOOC and all. So there is no meaning in always saying that, okay, institution is, they are deciding the syllabus, they are deciding the methods, or we are not getting the support, or we are not getting that kind of you have the freedom, because that was not there earlier. 10, 15 years before, you could not be a teacher with a different curriculum, with a different space, with a different angle or a different thought. You can today, along with your regular teaching, have your own courses, which are given in an open domain, which might not even be taken by anybody in my institution. It might be taken by a lot of people outside. So all these possibilities are there. Why I'm telling you all these possibilities? Because it is based on these possibilities that you explore the potential of a person. And in your MBA or in your NAC or in the accreditation goals, they talk about how much of visibility you have ensured through perhaps the space that was given to you, where you can think of certain things even beyond the horizons that we are talking about in terms of time and place and institution. So that potential is there, and don't think that these are things which can be discarded. I do know that there are lots of people who are talented, specifically some people who have their own observations, who have their own experience, who have their own compiled data, who have their own databases. So they can see how this can move. And finally, this also has got something to do with the depth or the extent to which you are putting content into a curriculum and the purpose behind it. That's why you're saying your lesson plan, and yesterday we were talking about what is the purpose. If you're putting something into a module as part of the curriculum of any particular program, there must be some purpose behind that. And that purpose is what justifies the outcome. If you're just put it for the sake of mere remembering, yes, you say that this is only to remember. In history, there will be certain things which are meant only for remembering. Even in other sciences, there could be certain things which are meant only for remembering. So unless you learn the purpose, you will not be able to go by this process. Now, the last point that I want to make here is that when somebody is involving an exercise of this kind, your in fact, in your process of teaching itself, when you're indulging in a process of teaching itself, there are possibilities that you will see certain things, variations in the learner in terms of this unistructural thing that you thought about one which should come first, but that was not. Some student came out with something which is different. You thought about the multi-structural with 4 or 5, but there are students who had 6 or 7. So there is a lot of potential for, and again in the fourth stage, when we were saying analyzing, arguing, contrast and contradiction, even in that stage, there is lots of things which we learn. That means in the process of becoming outcome based or outcome oriented, we ourselves are learning a lot. We ourselves are transforming a lot, and uh, convincing convincing others is possible when you are yourself convinced. Communicating is possible when yourself you have internally communicated to you well. Relating to others is possible when you yourself have a good relational confidence in what you're doing. So the advantage or the advantage, the specific advantage that we have of this model is the possibility that we are enriching ourselves in the reach out or in the pursuit of knowledge. And obviously, you will be very sought after. And that is where your institution also grows along with you. This is what we're trying to look at. So Solo is a structure of observed learning outcome, where this movement is just as simple as this. Just understanding this one slide is the entire depth of it. And its relation to the content that you have and you're going to develop and the possibilities that you have. So once again, thank you for this opportunity. And I hope, as I said here, there was an outcome. So we are all the time talking about outcome. So there is an outcome, at least you think of whether both the Bloom's taxonomy as well as the Solo does convey some meaning to me in the place I teach, in the classroom, with the students I deal, in the environment where I'm working, what kind of meaning I can create there, how do I enrich my own potential? So that is where we have to examine yourself, understand that today, because of the huge developments in technology, that is already obvious to you, you can see that you can make yourself one of the most sought after teachers if you can design good courses under good programs, or you can even give courses under the existing programs which are offered by different institutions who would like it to be more transformative in its approach and more driven by competency building, skilling, developmental approach in its optics. So thank you so much. And now I'm open to questions or things which you would like to add or share or suggest that you have. So those things we can take up now. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Now the forum is open for questions. Sir, I have two questions posted in the chat box. I'll read it for you. One question was, sir, could you please explain the Solo map with any simple example? So I think that question is already, that query might already been answered because you have been throughout the session, you have been giving a lot of examples. So I hope Amardeep sir, I hope the query is answered already. If you still have any more clarification needed, you may please ask now.
I think
yes, ma'am, it is answered. Thank you very much, ma'am and sir.
I have given an example of stress. I have given an example of product customization. I have given an example of Ahimsa. May not be perfect in terms of its academic content. I've just put some examples, but this is just to tell you that the key or the essence of it is how from a very vague stage to one structure, multiple structure, relationship between structures, and finally to extended knowledge we move. So I think 4 or 5 cases I have presented over.
Sir, one more query.
Yeah, other questions?
One more query is there in the chat box. Sir, is it possible to have a brief crux in core lengthy theoretical subjects?
Definitely, definitely. See, when we are saying theoretical subjects, so let us say history, or let us say literature. Let us say I'm talking about a Shakespeare's play. Now, you start with, say, the Mughal Empire. So when I'm saying that this is a historical period which happened between this century and this century, that is something which is, again, there is an element of vagueness in this. Why should I learn this? Why should I know about this particular? So I can say that this was a dynasty which was mighty in its military power, say one example. So I say that, okay, this is characterized by military power, or this is a dynasty which was colonial. So colonialism will be one factor which I'm talking about. Then I would say colonialism, military power. So I'm relating. So in history also it can happen. Only thing is the purpose will be different, the application will be different. Whatever, let it be any subject for that matter. Even when you teach hardcore subjects like a drama or a poetry, now there is, I'm saying that this is a poetry which was given by so and so. The theme in that is this, but then that might not be very well understood. Then I'm saying the background in this, in which this poet created this is this. So one structure comes. Then the background and his characters have this relationship, multiple structure comes. Then he is arguing about the concept of human love, or he is talking about a concept of emotion, or he is talking about sentiments towards a particular group. The third relationship comes, sentiments, love, affection, concern. Then you go to the story. Now you appeal to that. Now, why are you getting the whole richness of this? You again are seeing a society outside. And when you see that society outside, somebody who has been exposed to the same emotions, same handling of sentiments, same characters in the play, they have a more refined thinking about their own concepts. So that is the idea here. So also, why are you studying the history? I understand that these were the kings who ruled like this. These were the things which were good in him. These were the things, this was the administrative reforms that he did. This was the golden, what do you call, facets of his rule. So there are lots of things which stood over there, the support that he got, the kind of construction, administrative, political, social reforms that he brought, the economic change which he brought. So that is standing as a learning. And these are the things which somebody did not do. Somebody did, somebody did not do. I relate that. And then I argue that, okay, finally the argument can come. Is this king good or bad? What this lesson that he has taught, was it something that he did was right or wrong? Different things can come. And then why ultimately what are you trying to do? This is something where I get enriched myself. Now I can look into a historical perspective, which could be perhaps futuristic. I can have the competency to judge, to infer, to interpret. So it can happen in any discipline. Need not essentially be confined to one particular field.
Thank you, sir. Is there any more questions from the participants? You may please make use of this time for that. If there are any more clarifications required, please come up and put it forward.
I think you can, thing which you can do perhaps as part of this workshop or even otherwise individually, not for the purpose of what you call external compulsions or interventions. One thing which all of you can perhaps do is, I've given a structure at the end. All of you will be in some particular domain in some specific course, be it in engineering or in management or in whatever. So there, you look at one of your courses which you consider to be relatively very easy, and there maybe for some one or two modules in that particular course, you try to see whether you can start with some basic data, facts and figures, and see how from there one single uni-structural thing comes up using that data. Like say, for example, suppose I'm talking about the COVID pandemic. I can say that, okay, maximum deaths were in one particular state or in one particular country. And I'm saying that this is, as far as the health is concerned, this is the strongest impact. As far as the economy is concerned, this is the place where a lot of production. So then you're trying, this is information. This data, you move to information. And then from there, you're saying, okay, COVID means death. One structure. COVID means death, loss of employment. Two. COVID means death, loss of employment, social relationship, movement of goods loss. So 4, 5, 6. Then I'm relating. Are all these things, how all these things are connected? Then how to deal with this disaster. So there can be a lot of arguments in that. It is a health issue, it's a social issue, it's a political issue, it's all these issues. Arguments can come. And based on these arguments, I'm saying, okay, in my industry, in my field, I believe this could be one intervention where similar disasters can be managed in future in a better way. So this is an exercise in which you should indulge. So that's why I said both the solo as well as your Bloom's taxonomy is not. It is more appreciated and understood when you internalize it in terms of what actually you do in terms of your, then you will see that, okay, when I'm carefully doing this, this is going to support my transacting the curriculum in the class, because now I have created structures, I have created data. Based on this, I have my assignments, I have my plan of action, I have my cases, I have my lab work. I'm going to give them some good visits. I'm going to ask them to take some good cases. So all these can happen on that form. It is more of how you actually, that's why I said a good solo exercise is going to give you life in terms of your teaching learning, and it is going to give life and meaning to what the student or the learner learned, and that is what is going to enrich them. So this is sequential, but it is transformative.
Sir, there are two more queries in the group, sir. Could you please give some research paper reference, including yours, about Solo, its evolution, practice, challenges, which can be posted in the WhatsApp group or Google Drive?
I can give it to you in the form like what we have done. We have not, this is something which, as far as I am concerned, we have done in terms of our School of Business Management in our OBE model. We have created some illustrations and exercises, but that is something which we have started implementing only from 2020 under the Bloom's taxonomy. Solo is something which we have worked on in terms of a working paper jointly with our education department under a madam called Divya Siman, where we are going to look at publication. So in terms of my work, we have had workshops which I've organized on this slide, both at the Higher Education Council as a department. In terms of literature that is available, I've given you two sources already on the website of John Biggs and Felix, which is the Kevin example, which is available in lot. Is available in lot. Lot of work has it. It is not that it is all, everybody has said it is good. There are papers which are for it and there are papers which are against it. Just like I said, there are critical aspects of Bloom's taxonomy also. And it has evolved. But this is something which started in '82. And it is not fully new in the sense that many of the verb part, action part, taking, conceiving the purpose part is all there in Bloom's taxonomy. It's only an extended version of that, but it talks about looking at the observation. So in my case, maybe if I get that publication out, I will share that. Now what I have is only the workshop experiences of what we have done, and that is not much with Solo. It is more with, because you will be knowing or you will be agreeing. Basically, why many of us are thinking of it is because of the accreditation and quality parameters. So there, OB is more talked about, and the Bloom's taxonomy is more talked about in the Higher Education Council as well as in the NAC and UGC perspective. So that is where that has gone more deep into. Solo has not gone that deep because that is what is more applicable. But if you just say OB, it can be either of these two ones. Here we have, for us, the instructional design given from top was more for the other. That's why we went to, but then these two have got its own approaches which can be adopted.
Thank you, sir. Sir, one more question. According to NEP 2020, it is either teaching or research oriented. Then how could one define the POs, COs? Your input, sir.
I don't know what you mean by that, because under the NEP, you're saying you're a research institution or you're a teaching institution. What is said in POs and COs and PO, PSO and COs is for teaching only. It is basically for teaching. Now, again, don't be under the wrong concept that when you're saying teaching and research, that universities can be teaching and research. There also, what you're going to achieve in research has got something to do with the PSOs and the COs that you have in your teaching. So all teaching institutions and all research institutions, even in research, you have your coursework, you have your research projects, which can again have COs and PSOs. So it is something which can happen everywhere. NEP is not saying that you should have only research without POs and PSOs. It is talking about, even in research programs, you have got coursework where you have POs and POs. So it is something which is relevant in all organizations. Be it exclusively for teaching, it is very relevant. Teaching and research also it is relevant. And even exclusively for research, there are certain literature aspects which are looked into where it becomes relevant.
Thank you, sir. Any more questions? Participants, any more questions from your side?
Okay, so wish you all the very best. Try to look at this in terms of at least the changing methodologies that you can have in a small way. I would suggest that think initially at least for certain things that you do as part of your assignments, as part of your case studies, as part of your internal tests, as part of your continuous assessment, because these are the things which are left to the freedom of a teacher. So there at least you can look up these possibilities that you can anchor on. So thank you so much and all the very best.
Thank you, sir. So if there are no more clarification, we are just winding up the session. And I take this opportunity to express my sincere thanks and appreciation to Dr. Gabriel Simon Tattal, sir, for the efforts that he has taken to demonstrate the solo taxonomy structure with great clarity. The session was very interesting and captivating, I should say that, with a lot of examples from different areas. So we really had a good learning experience, sir. On behalf of St. Kitts College of Engineering, I wholeheartedly thank you for being part of this FTP and sharing your knowledge with us, sir. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.